Hi everyone, welcome back. So last week I told you that we were going to dig into each of the big five, and those are those universal characteristics that researchers use to evaluate personalities based upon five basic traits, and those are openness, conscientiousness, extraversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism. And it's not that simple to say that you are one of the five, because every personality contains a mixture of those five, and each trait is really measured on a scale from very low to very high. But today we're going to start with extraversion. The terms extrovert and introvert are largely attributed to psychologist Carl Jung, although the common understanding is much different from his original intent. We tend to think of extraversion as that outgoing, talkative, energetic, life of the party kind of person, right? Where introversion describes more of a loner who's very reserved and quiet and maybe even bashful and shy. Extraversion and introversion are typically viewed as a single continuum, meaning that if you're high on one end, then that means you're low on the other. But Carl Jung suggested that everyone has both an introvert and an extrovert inside, with one being more dominant than the other in different situations. And he really felt like rather than focusing on behavior, he defined extraversion as an attitude type that was characterized by a focus on how you interacted with the outside world, where introversion was an attitude with a focus on your own self-discovery and introspection. According to the big five, people who score high in extraversion enjoy social attention. They're much more likely to experience strong positive emotions when interacting with others, and they're often described as thrill seekers or risk takers. One study shows that extroverts are much more likely to have car accidents because they were driving too fast or they were listening to loud music. They're also much more likely to strike up conversations with people they don't know, strangers, right? And that enables them to take on leadership roles at work. Those who score high in introversion are more subdued emotionally, and they tend to keep more of their thoughts to themselves, and they're much more content being alone. Recent research shows that introversion has its strengths too, and introverts are typically better listeners than extroverts, and while they work really well independently and they're able to focus and come up with a thoughtful solution to problems like all on their own, their peers show respect for their contributions when they do share with a larger group. According to a study done by genetics specialist Dean Hamer of the National Cancer Institute, our level of extraversion is genetic, and those people that score really high on the extraversion scale are less sensitive to dopamine. And remember, dopamine is that reward and pleasure chemical in the brain, but it's also responsible for feelings of excitement and motivation. And this is why extroverts need a lot more external stimuli to maintain their drive, compared to introverts who find too much external stimuli overwhelming. Another study showed that the amount of blood that passes through certain areas of the brain determines whether we are an introvert or an extrovert. And extroverts have much more blood flowing through their temporal lobes, and that's the part of the brain that's involved with emotional and sensory experiences, while introverts have much more blood flow on their frontal lobes. And remember, that's the part of the brain that is in charge of all of the executive functioning, the problem solving, and that internal processing. We all exhibit extraversion and introversion at times, and we all know people that we would say are introverts or extroverts. But you may be an introvert in one situation and then switch to being an extrovert in another situation. This is called Freetrade, which means that you have the ability to behave against your dominant nature when you need to advance a goal or achieve something. Now you know. Extroverts are not always loud and shallow, and introverts are not always quiet and shy. We just get satisfaction from different things in different situations. So whichever is stronger in your personality, it's important to know that you can act against your nature when you need to. The brain is complex enough and amazing enough to let us use free traits when we need to. Want to learn more about how the brain works and how you can make it work better for you? Check out my book, Happy Hour with Einstein. And remember, life is always better when you share the good stuff.